I'm Darlene. Standing in the grand foyer of the estate I've built, I'm surrounded by the stunned silence of my parents. Mom's jaw is dropped, and Dad's face has lost all color. Just moments ago, our venue coordinator, Lisa, blurted out about the ownership renovations for the bridal suite, shattering the carefully constructed illusion my family had about me. My mind flashes back to my childhood in the Thompson household. I was the middle child, sandwiched between my older sister, Victoria, and younger brother, Ethan. Victoria, at 35, was the family's pride and joy. A graduate of Harvard Law, she worked as a high-profile corporate lawyer at a top-tier firm and was married to a well-known cardiologist. Ethan, 28, had an MBA from Stanford and traveled the world for his consulting job, always coming back with tales of exciting business deals. I, on the other hand, chose architecture. I was drawn to the creativity and the challenge of bringing designs to life. But my parents, especially my father, saw it as a risky path. Dad, a traditional man who valued stability and a steady income, would often tell his friends at the country club, "Architecture is a nice dream, but Darlene needs to think about making a real living." Mom, more sympathetic but still concerned, would nod and say that it was probably just a phase. When I graduated from architecture school 8 years ago, I was hired by a respected firm in New York. But my family's reaction was lackluster. "That's nice, dear," Mom said, "but when are you going to get a proper job?" In their eyes, a proper job had a guaranteed salary and a clear career path, not the uncertainties of the creative field. During my first year at the firm, I proposed an innovative approach to adaptive reuse projects. Instead of just designing buildings for others to construct, I thought architects should take charge of the whole development process. My supervisor scoffed at the idea, but it stuck with me. I started small, investing my meager savings into a rundown warehouse in a gentrifying neighborhood. Working evenings and weekends, I transformed it into trendy loft apartments that sold for 3 times my initial investment. But my family was too busy with Victoria's promotions and Ethan's international projects to notice. The second project was a defunct factory that I converted into a mixed-use commercial space. By the time I finished, I realized I wasn't just good at architecture, I was exceptional at the business side of development. While my family worried about my financial stability, I was quietly building a portfolio that would have impressed even Ethan's business school professors. 5 years ago, I took the biggest risk of my career. A struggling event venue in the suburbs was on the verge of bankruptcy. The location was perfect, with historical charm, modern accessibility, and beautiful landscaping. The asking price was high, but I saw its potential that the previous owners had missed. When I mentioned the purchase at Sunday dinner, Mom's eyes widened. "You're buying what?" "Darlene, that's a huge financial commitment. Are you sure you can handle something so complicated?" "Event planning isn't architecture." Dad added, "You have no experience in the hospitality industry." I just smiled and said it was a learning opportunity, not mentioning that I'd spent 2 years researching the industry, consulting with event planners, and developing renovation plans. The renovation took 18 months and all the money I'd made from my previous projects. I gutted the interior, redesigned the floor plan, added state-of-the-art lighting and sound systems, and created outdoor ceremony spaces that made the most of the natural beauty. When I was done, the Rosewood Estate was no longer just an event venue, it was a destination. The first wedding we hosted exceeded all expectations. The couple chose our venue over 3 other high-end locations because of the architectural details and innovative design. Their photographer said it was the most beautiful wedding venue they'd worked at in 15 years. Within 6 months, I was booking events 2 years in advance. I kept a low profile, reinvesting profits into property improvements and expanding my development portfolio. To my family, I was still just the architect who'd bought an old building as a side project. The estate's reputation grew steadily, with wedding magazines featuring it in articles that focused on its architectural innovation. Industry professionals started referring clients to Rosewood Estate, knowing they could expect top-notch service. By last year, Rosewood Estate was generating more revenue annually than Victoria's law practice and Ethan's consulting salary combined. But my family still saw me as the impractical artist who needed guidance on financial responsibility. 6 months ago, I got engaged to Lucas, a talented photographer. My family's concern reached new heights. Lucas was creative and talented, but in their eyes, he was another person without a reliable income. The engagement announcement dinner turned into an intervention about realistic wedding planning. Keep it simple, Mom advised. There are great community centers that are very affordable. Dad added, fancy venues are a waste of money. Victoria, always helpful, printed out a list of budget wedding options. I thanked them for their concern and promised to be financially responsible. The truth was, I'd been dreaming of having my wedding at Rosewood Estate for years. Lucas understood the family dynamics without me having to explain. When I first took him to the estate, he said, "This place is amazing. Whoever designed it really understands how to create a perfect event space." I just smiled, not telling him that I was the designer. Planning our wedding was a delicate balance between creating the celebration we wanted and managing my family's expectations. I arranged vendor meetings at neutral locations, handled most details via email and phone, and focused conversations with my parents on guest lists and menu preferences. 2 months before the wedding, Mom asked if we should do a walk-through of the venue I'd chosen. I agreed and scheduled the visit for a Saturday when there were no events. I arrived early to make sure everything was perfect. The gardens were immaculate, the interior spaces were spotless, and all the architectural details I'd spent years perfecting were on full display. When Mom and Dad arrived, their expressions were filled with concern. "This looks very expensive, Darlene. Are you sure you can afford it?" Mom asked. Dad added, "Places like this charge a fortune. You don't want to start your marriage in debt." I led them into the grand foyer, where the afternoon sunlight streamed through the custom-designed stained glass windows, creating a dramatic effect. Mom stopped in her tracks. "This is beautiful, but it must cost a fortune. How can you afford it?" Just then, Lisa, our venue coordinator, joined us. "Good afternoon. You must be Darlene's parents." "I'm Lisa, the coordinator here at Rosewood Estate." Mom was still looking around worriedly. "We're worried about the cost. Darlene and Lucas are in creative fields, and venues like this are very expensive." Mom declared, "This place is too expensive for you, Darlene. Be realistic." Dad supported her, "Find a more affordable place." I nodded calmly, used to their protective concern. But then, Lisa, looking at her folder, said, "Miss Thompson, shall we finalize your ownership renovations for the bridal suite? The contractors are waiting for approval on the marble selections." Mom's jaw dropped, and Dad's face went pale. "Ownership renovations?" Mom repeated weakly. Lisa realized her mistake immediately. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I assumed you knew." I took a deep breath. "I own Rosewood Estate, Dad. I bought it 5 years ago, designed the renovations, and turned it into one of the top wedding venues in the Northeast." Mom looked around in disbelief. "You own this entire property?" I nodded. "All 52 acres, including the main building, gardens, chapel, reception halls, and bridal facilities. I designed most of the renovations myself and oversaw the construction." Lisa added, "Miss Thompson is one of our region's most innovative architectural developers. Rosewood Estate has been featured in many wedding magazines and architectural journals. We host over 250 events per year." The number hit Dad hard. He started to ask, "But how did you afford it?" Then stopped, realizing how little he'd understood my financial situation. I explained, "The architecture firm was just my starting point. I've been developing properties for 8 years. Rosewood Estate is my flagship project, but I have other residential and commercial projects across the Northeast." Mom sat down heavily in one of the restored antique chairs. Darlene, why didn't you tell us? I said gently. I tried to mention my projects over the years, but you were always focused on Victoria's legal career and Ethan's success. My work seemed less important. Dad walked around the space, noticing details he'd missed before. This renovation must have cost millions. I confirmed, it cost $2,900,000, but the property is now worth over $9 million, and the annual revenue covers all operating costs and reinvestment in improvements. Mom looked up, tears in her eyes. If you've been this successful, why did you let us think you were struggling? I replied, I didn't want to make you feel bad. Your concern came from love, but I was tired of constantly proving myself. It was easier to let you worry. Dad shook his head. We were worried because we love you and wanted you to be secure. But you were already secure, even building an empire. Lisa cleared her throat. Shall we continue the tour? The ceremony spaces are really spectacular, especially the outdoor pavilion Ms. Thompson designed for sunset weddings. We spent the next 2 hours walking through the estate. Mom was in awe of the gardens. Darlene, you designed all of this? I said, the landscaping was a collaboration, but I designed the architectural elements and the overall layout. Dad stopped at the outdoor bar, studying the stonework. This level of craftsmanship is exceptional. You're not just successful, you're truly exceptional at this. For the first time in my life, I heard my parents use the word exceptional to describe my work. As we finished the tour, I could see that my parents' perception of me had completely changed. Back in the foyer, Mom said, Darlene, I owe you a huge apology. We treated you like a child who needed protection when you'd already mastered business complexities we can't even understand. I replied, it's not about apologies. You were being loving parents, but now you understand why Lucas and I aren't worried about wedding costs. Dad laughed, a mix of embarrassment and admiration. We came here worried about you overspending on a venue, and you own the venue. The irony is almost too much. Just then, Lisa approached with her folder. Ms. Thompson, we have 3 couples for consultations this afternoon, and the florist needs approval for next weekend's event. Mom said, you should handle your business. We've taken enough of your time, and we have a lot to process. As they were about to leave, Dad pulled me aside. Darlene, did our advice about practical careers and financial security hurt you? I thought for a moment. It hurt because it felt like you couldn't see my achievements, but I knew you were trying to protect me. Your intentions were always loving. Dad said, our assumptions were completely wrong. We protected you from struggles you'd already overcome and missed your success. I replied, the success wouldn't have been possible without the values you taught me. You gave me the tools to build this. Mom hugged me tightly. We're so proud of you, Darlene. Not just for the business success, but for how you handled our misunderstanding. That evening, Lucas called to ask about the venue tour. How did they react? I said, at first, they were shocked. Then they were embarrassed about their assumptions. But I think they're genuinely proud now. He asked, how do you feel about them knowing? I thought about it. Relieved mostly. It was tiring pretending to be less successful. But I'm also sad it took so long for them to see me clearly. He said, they see you now, and they're going to see you walk down the aisle at the venue you designed. That's amazing, Darlene. 2 days later, Victoria called. Mom told me about Rosewood Estate. Darlene, why didn't you ever mention you're a real estate mogul? I said mildly, it never came up. She was incredulous. It never came up? You own a multi-million-dollar business. I've been giving you career advice for years when you were already more successful than me. The following Sunday, the family dinner was completely different. Instead of talking about Victoria's cases and Ethan's projects, the conversation was about my upcoming wedding and the business at Rosewood Estate. Dad asked detailed questions about development financing and construction management, And Mom wanted to know about client relations and event coordination. Mom said during dessert, "I keep thinking about all the times we worried about your financial future. You must have wanted to laugh at our concern." I said, "I never wanted to laugh. Your concern came from love, even if it was based on misunderstanding. I'm glad you know the truth now." Ethan, still processing the news, asked, "Darlene, are you angry with us for not taking you seriously all these years?" I thought carefully. "I'm not angry, but I'm sad it took so long for you to see my capabilities. Family support would have meant a lot when I was building this business." Dad said firmly, "You have our support now. Whatever you need for the wedding or future projects, just ask." I replied, "What I need most is for you to trust that Lucas and I can make good decisions about our life together. Our wedding will be beautiful, our finances are solid, and we're excited about the future." Mom smiled, a mix of maternal love and new-found respect. "I think we can manage that." 3 months later, the wedding was everything I'd dreamed of. The ceremony took place in the outdoor pavilion at sunset, with the light filtering through the trees just as I'd designed. Lucas's photography colleagues said it was the most photogenic venue they'd ever worked at. Victoria's maid of honor speech was full of confessions. I spent years giving Darlene advice about practical career choices when she was building something more impressive than any of us. Tonight, we're celebrating in the venue she designed and built. "Darlene, we're proud of you and sorry it took us so long to understand your achievements." Dad's father of the bride toast was even more emotional. "Darlene taught me that success doesn't always look the way we expect." While we worried about her financial security, she was creating financial independence. While we encouraged practical choices, she was building something that combines art, business, and innovation in ways we never imagined. Tonight, we celebrate not just her marriage to Lucas, but the extraordinary woman she's become. As Lucas and I danced our first dance in the reception hall I designed for perfect acoustics and romantic lighting, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The venue was not just a building, it was the physical manifestation of my hard work and the proof that I'd turned my creative vision into reality. Later that evening, Lucas pulled me aside. "How does it feel to have your family finally understand who you really are?" I looked around the space I'd created, the architectural details, the business systems, and the client relationships. "It feels like coming home," I said. Not to the venue, but to being seen clearly by the people I love. The Rosewood estate had become more than just real estate or a successful business. It was the place where my family finally recognized the accomplished entrepreneur hidden in plain sight for years. And as our guests danced late into the night, I realized that the most successful project I'd ever completed was the life I'd built, balancing my creative vision with my family's love.